Now we are going to do a book cover mock-up. So this is one I found on graphicburger.com. I can supply the link, or you can find it by just typing in book when you go to the mock-up section in that website. And this is a very simple one. We're not going to be able to customize this one quite as much, but I have a couple of book designs I created that we can test out on this. And so just like we did with the previous design, there's certain layers. There's one that has a little red toggle on and off, and you can toggle that on and off to find out what that layer changes. And so this changes the front cover right over here, and it looks like there might be another one. So here's a folder cover, and here's a folder spine, and so this one will probably change the spine of the book. So let's go ahead and go into cover, and let's go ahead and find that red layer and toggle that on and off just to make sure. And let's double click on this smart object thumbnail, and it's going to open up that separate window. So this is where we can go ahead and add our book cover. So let's try it with the first book cover example I have. This is a book cover that I designed in a graphic design masterclass. So I'm going to use this one as an example. So this is already laid out as a final printable file with the spine, the front cover, and the back cover. So this is how a printer or a publisher will want to have your final cover of your book. So how do we adapt this to a mock-up? There's a couple things we can do. We can isolate the spine and isolate the front cover as a separate file and export it as a JPEG, and then bring it into this extra window and save it. That's an option. We can even grab the elements we have right here in the book and just pop it over. I'm just copying and pasting it in here, and we can line it up. And the things with mockups you have to be aware of is most mockups are done using the metric system. So if you're in the United States and you're used to inches, you're going to notice that the sizes are more European sizes. They might be a little bit taller in dimensions. So you have to these are mockups that you use online. So you just have to kind of get used to maybe a slight change of dimensions. So if you're used to a 6x9 inch book cover, they are going to use maybe a different sizing for that. It's not going to be a dramatic difference, but you might need to adjust the height of your design or the width to match the European size presentation. But when you learn to create your own, you can create it using your own sizes. So we're going to scale this down to kind of get a nice look. It's all about presentation. Doesn't have to be exact because it's not going to be printed. So it's just as long as it looks good. It could be slightly off in terms of width as long as it's as realistic as possible. So let's go ahead and close out this window. We're going to click X, and it's going to ask us to save. Yes, we're going to save it, and it's going to automatically apply this to the book cover. So there it goes. It automatically populated. We can always go back, double click, and change the size if we want to bring in more of the outside. So now let's do the spine. So I think they have a separate folder. They really organize this mock-up really nicely. So here's the red layer. This is, go ahead and toggle it on and off to find it. So let's double click on the smart object thumbnail, and now we have the spine. So you can craft and create the spine right on this layer and save it. Or if we already have a book cover saved, we could just take this layer. I'm just going to copy and paste. Right in here, you could just save a JPEG of your book and do the same thing. Or in this case, to make it a little easier, since it's got like all these different layers here, what I could do is I can just use the crop tool. I'm just going to crop my spine. And sometimes spines on mockups can be thinner than your actual spine. And so that's when you might have to go in and increase your spine size to match the mockup. Mockups aren't going to be perfectly sized if you're getting them online. They're going to be their specific size. So what I can do now that I've cropped that, I can save this as a JPEG. And just another way to do it. So here's just a simple JPEG. I can do the same thing I did before and just drag it over or copy and paste it right in here. And we can go ahead and right click this, and we're going to make this a smart object. Anytime I have photos I bring in, I like to make them smart objects, because when you make it a smart object, you're basically making it scalable. And so I can make this so I'm going to go ahead and convert to smart object, this little photo that I brought in. And I can make it really small and adjust it and press enter. But then the great thing about making it a smart object is I can go ahead and make it bigger, press enter, and it doesn't pixelate, it doesn't blur. And that's the power of smart objects, which is pretty much all we're going to use when we're making mockups. So all I did was I right clicked and I just went ahead and made that a smart object so that I didn't have any pixelation, because I'm going to need to size this quite a bit. It's not going to match the spine perfectly. The spine looks to be a little bit thinner. So sometimes you have to rework your text just for the presentation purposes because the mock-up's not going to fit perfectly, and that's okay. So let's close our window, click save, and it automatically populated the mock-up on the spine. So you'll notice this mock-up has this really heavy linen kind of texture on top of it, which I'd like to have a more slick looking book. So now that we're learning how mockups are created, we can find that layer and eliminate it to make it our own. So let's go ahead and find that layer. Let's go ahead and toggle off. Maybe we can find something that says texture. There it is. Overlay texture, we can toggle it on and off, and we can find that that is where that is located. We can go up and we can reduce the opacity so it's still there, but not as strong. So you can see that looks, I think, a little bit better with that reduced. And so let's zoom out and see what some of these other layers do. So there's your book cover. There's your shadow right over here. So we talked a lot about how shadows are cast. So I'm going to toggle this on and off right here, shadow. So you can see how much of a difference that makes. So this is a soft light shadow. So it's taken inside or taken in a light box. It's not like a direct lighting source. This is an indirect lighting source. So it's nice and soft and blurred out. So let's go ahead and toggle this on and off. So big difference in adding that shadow. And so we have a background, so change the background color. So I'm just double clicking right here on the swatch, change background color. And let's see if we can't bring in any colors we think would look really good. So, ooh, the green looks really nice. When I use red, that looks great, but you don't want to overpower the red in the flowers. You want this red to remain the main focal point. So using red looks really great, but it also competes with the main focal point of the book. So I think sticking with a green might work best for this book, or even a gold. The gold looks really nice. So, I mean, it doesn't matter which one, as long as you're not competing with that red. So there's the table right there. I guess all they did was draw a rectangle, and when they drew the shadows, it made everything look a lot more realistic. That is just a simple rectangle that they added, and when they painted on and hand drew the shadows and made it look three-dimensional. So let's go ahead, let's collapse this folder, and we have this other folder called spine that we're going to uncollapse, and let's see other little details that we can modify here. So it looks like there's a texture also on top of this, and so you can see they added a little bit of highlights on this layer, and that's what we're going to be creating ourselves a little bit later on. But you'll notice the difference, and that is flat. And when you add just a little bit of highlights to coming in from the right side, it adds so much realism and richness to the spine. So we can also reduce this texture just like we did over here. We can just reduce it maybe instead of 25%, reduce the opacity just a little bit. We like to have a little bit of that in there, but maybe not as strong. And I think that's about what we can customize here. So just playing around with the background a little bit to see what we can do. See, that works okay because it's not as red, it's not as strong, so that could work too. So just whatever you can do to find the right background, just like that. This would normally take about a minute or two to add everything to. You just get a JPEG, you bring it into the window and you save it, or you can edit it right on here. This is just like any old Photoshop layer, so when you save it, it will automatically populate on the mock-up. So hopefully this is getting you excited about creating your own now that we understand the very basics of how some of these layers and smart objects work.